Welcome back. So we have been doing a unit on hypothesis testing, and this is our very last lesson. Today we're doing hypothesis testing for proportions. Let's dive in. We've done hypothesis testing for the mean, both small and large samples. For the large samples, we did the calculations longhand. For small samples, we used the t-distribution, and we jumped right into using the calculator. Now we're testing proportions, and we're going to use technology to help us once again. We'll use both critical values and p-values, and we'll be using the z-distribution. A research center claims that 45% of people in the US support making cigarettes illegal within the next decade. To test this claim, you survey 200 Americans and find that 49% support this law. At alpha equals 0.05, is there enough evidence to support the research center's claim? Let's use critical values. Our null hypothesis is p equals 0.45. Our alternate is that p, doesn't equal 0.45. Significance level of 0.05, we're using the z-distribution and a two-tailed test. Since we're using critical values, our decision rule is going to be this. If z is less than negative 1.96, or z is greater than 1.96, we'll reject the null. If z is between those two values, we'll fail to reject the null. So grab your calculator, go to Stat, Tests, and go down to one prop z-test, or one proportion z-test. Now we're going to plug in everything we know, but look at this. It says x, 98. That's nowhere in our problem. So where did that come from? We know that 49% support the law, and 49% of 2,000 is 98. So that's where that came from. Now I'll go down and hit calculate for a two-tailed test. And here we have our calculated z-value of 1.137, or about 1.14. So now we can compare that to our decision rule, and since z is between plus or minus 1.96, we'll fail to reject the null, which means that it's likely that 45% of people support making cigarettes illegal. Another research center claims that 55% of US adults regularly watch their local television news. To test this, you sample 425 adults in the US. Of the 425, 255 respond that yes, they do watch the local news regularly. We'll use a significance level of 0.10. Is there enough evidence to support the claim? Using p-values. So our null is that the proportion is less than or equal to 55%. And our alternate hypothesis is that the proportion is more than 55%. Significance level of 0.10, it's a right-tailed test in the z-distribution. Because we're using p-values, our decision rule is now going to be, if p is less than 0.10, we'll reject the null. If p is greater than or equal to 0.10, we'll fail to reject the null. And now we calculate. Back to stat tests, and down again to one prop z-test. Plug in everything we know. This time they gave us the x value of 255. We're doing a right-tailed test, and we hit calculate. And we get a p-value of 0.019. So we'll take our z-value, rounding it up to about 0.02, compare that into our decision rule, and we've got since 0.02 is less than 0.10, we'll reject the null. So it's likely that more than 55% of US adults regularly watch their local TV news. So that wraps up our unit on hypothesis testing. It's so great to be able to use software because it goes really fast. But what's really important is learning how to use those hypothesis testing steps. Now, the next unit, we're also doing hypothesis testing. But instead of just using one sample, we're going to learn how to use two. Thanks for being here.